In 1982, Walt Disney Productions released a 6-minute stop-motion short, developed, written, and directed by a young animator at the studio, based on a poem he'd written titled Vincent. That short changed not just the life of that young filmmaker, but also the current state of cinema. It's time to appreciate the quiet importance and genuine artistry of Vincent, so we're bringing it straight out of the vault. In the late 1980s, a young conceptual artist at Walt Disney Productions named Tim Burton caught the unexpected attention of studio executive Julie Hickson and head of creative development Tom Wilhite. The two saw potential in the 24-year-old Burton, and they invested $60,000 into his concept, an adaptation of a poem he'd been debating turning into a children's book. Vincent centers around a young boy named, originally enough, Vincent, who embraces all things Gothic. Even though he's a very little boy, we follow his imaginative interpretation of the world around him as he plays pretend and transforms his life into an extended love letter to all things Gothic art. His life is shot like a German expressionist film. He conducts experiments on his dog to create monsters. He even goes mad with grief, as any good Edgar Allan Poe character should. The entire short is narrated in rhyme by the late and great Vincent Price, a personal hero of Tim Burton himself. And it's also just a really bittersweet reminder of how much we lost when Vincent Price died years and years ago. For Burton, Vincent was a major milestone. The personal story was his first real showcase for the distinct style that he has as a director. Burton next would produce a Disney Channel television special starring a Kung Fu Hansel and Gretel. Yes, seriously, that is a thing.
Hansel. So hot right now.
Along with a new short titled FRANKENWEENIE, a live-action version of the Frankenstein story, but transplanted to 1950 suburbia. It did not fly with Disney all that well, who actually fired Burton over the film, considering it too dark for the company. However, it did impress Paul Reubens, who was more famously at the time known as Pee Wee Herman. He chose Burton to direct his 1985 film adaptation of the character Pee-wee's Big Adventure based on how impressed he was with FRANKENWEENIE. That film's success would allow Burton to later expand his directing career and quickly become one of the most distinctive cinematic voices of his era, with films like Beetlejuice, Edward Scissorhands, and Ed Wood. He even eventually returned to Disney, producing the stop-motion holiday classic The Nightmare Before Christmas, and eventually returning to direct films like Alice in Wonderland. Burton's biggest impact on Hollywood, though, doesn't come from his own concepts. One of the most important things about Vincent is the chain of events that it caused. Because Burton directing Pee-wee's Big Adventure leads him to eventually reach the point in his career where he's given the helm of 1989's Batman.
Jack is dead, my friend. You can call me Joker.
That film revitalized the superhero genre as a cinematic idea, and would spawn a series of sequels, a number of different franchises constructed to try and compete with the success of Batman, and a complete morphing and transformation of what an action film in the 20th and 21st century would look like. We don't get to Avengers Endgame without the massive success of Tim Burton's 1989 Batman. And we don't get to the 1989 Batman without Vincent. We would be looking at a very different Hollywood and likely world if Tim Burton hadn't gotten that $60,000 investment. The other thing to really think about with Vincent, though, is that it's genuinely terrific. It is a very sweet and simple and distinctive short film. Vincent himself is just the right kind of precocious and imaginative child. Someone like Calvin or Bart Simpson. Somebody who stand out because of their creativity, even if it makes them very, very weird within their own world. It's clever and silly and childish in the best way possible. It feels authentic, and it feels like a real, honest reflection of what a little kid like Vincent, and let's be honest, like Tim Burton, sees the world and thinks of the world and interprets the world. Vincent isn't currently available on Disney+, but it can be found on some DVD copies of The Nightmare Before Christmas. It also does exist on places like YouTube, even though Disney may not be the biggest fan of that. But one can only hope that Vincent eventually gets the chance to rise from the Disney vaults once more, and get more attention and recognition for just how important to the actual history of cinema that it is.
To escape the madness, he reached for the door, but fell limp and lifeless down on the floor.